we want just to request that if you have any more questions, just type them on the chat, and we'll be able to share these resources, the presentation, with those who register, as well as post them on the GBV or our website. Our next session is about roundtable discussion on barriers to access and services, and will be facilitated by Stella Muthuri. Stella is a current Chief Executive Officer of Baobab Research Program Consortium, and will be assisted by Lillian Matemu, who is the Gender in Emergency Specialist for Middle East and Southern Africa Plan International. So welcome, Stella and Lillian.
Thank you for that, George. I just want to confirm that you can hear me okay before I proceed.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. So you've already done some of my work for me by introducing myself and my co-host this morning. But good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to this very important symposium that's focusing on male, child, and adolescent survivors of gender-based violence. So quite an important topic. We're loving the engagement on the chat so far. As you've heard, my name is Stella. Very excited to be tasked with co-facilitating this session, which is a round table discussion on barriers to access to services alongside Lillian Matemu. We have a great panel comprising of Blessing Muthama, Executive Director at FOST, based in Zimbabwe. We have Francis Kenneth Olusanmi, a postdoctoral fellow from Ekiti State University, based in Nigeria, and Christiana Paul, GBV Manager at Innovative Childcare and Women Empowerment Initiative, also based in Nigeria. So yes, looking forward to an engaging session, since we do consider that everybody that's represented here is at the forefront of either leading, researching, engaging with, implementing programs that provide response and prevention services, particularly to male, child, and adolescent survivors of GBV. So let's seek to use this session to enhance our knowledge, to share experiences. Please post any questions as we go along in the chat. We'll be coming back to them after the end of the panelists' presentations. I guess anybody that we don't get to, will find a way to respond to those questions in time. So with that, just allow me to hand over to Lillian. Lillian, I hope you're on the call.
Yes, I am, Stella. Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So we'll just dive right in with the questions and also just the discussion that we have for the amazing panelists. So the first question will go to Blessing, and it mainly looks at the norms and disclosure around the male children survivors. So Blessing, how do the prevailing social, cultural, and gender-related factors contribute to the sexual abuse for male children and adolescents, and impact their willingness to disclose their experiences? And in addition, also, how do these factors influence the effectiveness and relevance of response mechanisms provided by service providers? Over to you, Blessing.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Lillian, for that. Maybe just to give a background, that I'm working for a local organization called FOST that was established in 1997 to respond to the needs of orphaned and vulnerable children in Zimbabwe, particularly those who are in farming communities. And we are a member of a global alliance called Family for Every Child. And within this alliance, we have conducted some research on sexual violence against boys in about 9 countries globally. And we have been able to establish a movement for advocating for the support of boys who are affected by sexual violence. And through what we are calling the Blue Umbrella Day, we have been able to reach over 23 countries that have joined the campaign across the globe this year.
When this
So
session ends,
we
is
are
it
also
possible
collaborating
to announce
with ECPAT and other local partner organizations such as Go Plan International. And to respond to your question, Lillian, I am going to base my response on our research and programmatic experience. In 2020, we conducted a qualitative study on sexual violence affecting boys in Zimbabwe. And basically, the study aimed at providing an in-depth insights into social, cultural, and gender-related factors influencing sexual abuse of boys, and the effectiveness and relevance of the response mechanisms from service providers in the three districts that we targeted for this study. The insights that emerged from this study have significant implications around understanding the phenomenon of sexual violence against boys in Zimbabwe. We actually concluded through this study that social norms surrounding masculinity, they create expectations for boys to conform to a specific image, you know, of being a real man in quotes. And basically, this emphasizes physical and emotional strength, bravery, and bravery of being a provider and a protector. As we were growing up, I remember we were taught that boys don't cry, and that we shouldn't show emotions. Hence, showing emotions, you know, is seen as a sign of weakness. So while we may say boys, they enjoy, you know, certain privileges because they are boys in our culture, you'd realize that the pressure to conform to these issues around surrounding masculinity often outweighs them, leading, you know, to fear of ridicule and not being strong enough to protect themselves. So in the event that they experience violence, they then fail to report because they fear to be stigmatized by their peers and the community at large. A concerning finding was also that the dominant perception is that boys cannot be sexually abused, you know, leading to underreporting and social isolation for those who have experienced such abuse. This perception actually coupled with the lack of understanding and disbelief from caregivers and policymakers contributes to significant gaps in child protection services, policy and legislation that is pertaining to sexual violence affecting boys. Our report actually shares some quotes and voices from the boys regarding this. Because of time, I will not share the quotes, but I can share the link to the report so that you can get these quotes with the voices from the boys. The study concluded that there is a critical need for interventions that focus on the prevention and recovery of boys affected by sexual violence, as well as rising public awareness on the issue and the availability of support services. Importantly, addressing these gaps requires building the understanding of practitioners, also policymakers and communities on how social norms on masculinity and sexuality contributes to the sexual abuse of boys. It also calls for gender-neutral policies on child sexual abuse and gender-sensitive approaches that encompass the needs of both boys and girls. The research also recommends that efforts should be made to combat harmful stereotypes and improve protection systems for boys through advocacy campaigns such as the Blue Umbrella Day that I've just highlighted earlier on. By involving members in multiple countries, we see this campaign along with other initiatives that we have been implementing have actually demonstrated the potential for positive change in addressing issues of sexual violence affecting boys. Thank you very much, Stella. I hand it over back to you.
Thank you very much, Blessing, for that very elaborate response, and also highlighting very important factors that complement what the previous session had touched on around issues on social norms and some of the assumptions around sexual violence that affects boys, and also giving great recommendations on some of the things that we can do around advocacy and system strengthening for protection for male survivors equally, and strengthening the availability of services as well, and importance of incorporating and engaging policymakers. So that takes us on to the next question that I'll hand over to Stella.
Thank you, Lillian, and thank you, Blessing. I mean, I think that is really true, Lillian. The pressure surrounding masculinity vis-a-vis the purported, I guess you call them privileges that boys enjoy. So, I mean, it's really stark to hear, some of those findings. Thank you for keeping to time. I know it's really hard to condense all your work within a few minutes of a presentation, but I think there'll be a lot there for us to unpack. So the next question is to Francis, and it's on legal and policy frameworks. So Francis, from your work, how would you say that existing legal and policy frameworks address the needs of male children and adolescent survivors of gender-based violence? And what changes or improvements should be made to ensure that survivors are adequately protected and supported? Over to you, Francis.
Thank you so much for the privilege to contribute into this symposium, particularly this roundtable discussion. In Nigeria here, there are a series of legal frameworks that talks about gender-based violence in Nigeria. There are a series of them, and let me mention a few of them: the Nigerian Constitution, the Nigerian Criminal Code, and criminal laws of each state of the Federation of Nigeria, the Penal Code, the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, Criminal Procedure Act, Criminal Procedure Code, Federal High Court rules, and criminal trials, practice direction, Court of Appeal, practice direction, Supreme Court, practice direction, and the principal legislation on gender-based violence, which is the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act of 2015. All these legal frameworks actually has the objective to control gender-based violence, and also to punish offenders and bring the act into total or minimal reduction. However, all these laws do not capture male victims. The laws dwell so much on females, and this is one of the reasons that the act or the menace still prevail in our societies today. There are also some organizations that provide legal assistance to victims, such as Legal Aid, the Council of Nigeria, the Nigerian Bar Association, the Legal Defense Assistance Project, Federation of Female Lawyers, Women's Aid, Collective Socio-Economic Rights, and a whole lot of them, But these organizations, most of them, they provide the assistance. Yes, they go to court, they provide the legal services, but majorly they dwell much on female victims. I don't know, probably because of our culture, the masculinity nature of men, or looking at it that can male actually be victimized? Can a male actually suffer violence in the society? This is the issue, and because of this cultural belief, male victims they feel ashamed to come out, to speak out, you know, and experience is the trending issue in Nigeria now of a popular musician that died mysteriously in the last, I think about 2 weeks ago, you know. He kept suffering, you know, violence. He kept suffering intimidations from his peer groups, and he cannot speak out. He cannot reach out to the public. He cannot reach out to the government, you know, to inform the government or inform the public of his experience until he died, you know. And we look at it, since there is a legal framework on you know, since there is a legal framework on this maintenance, I think what we need to do, or what can be done, is to act.
I hope it's not just me, but I seem to have lost Francis.
That there is a... Hello? Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, you're back.
Yes. So a strong awareness has to be created to make people aware of the existing laws, you know. And also the law has to be the law, and the legal aid services has to be reevaluated, you know. Then when it's reevaluated, let's know the weakness of this law. Let's know the weakness of these legal aid services, and make a prompt improvement on it, since a law itself is not static, you know. Law has to be dynamic in nature. It has to follow the trend in the society, so as to make the law potent enough to achieve the purpose of which it was enacted, you know. Then there is also needs to be local communities encouragement to challenge harmful gender norms, and also to promote gender equality within their localities. There should also be made available to everybody easy access to an online reporting system. You know, since male victims by our nature or by our culture cannot come out to say this is what I am suffering, so there should be an online reporting system where victims could go to directly even in his bedroom, and make a report of what is experiencing. So these are the few recommendations we make in the paper, and that can also be made, that can also contribute to the success of this symposium. Thank you.
Thank you too, Francis, for that that really concise summary of the issues. Sounds like, yes, there are quite a few policies and laws in place, as well as organization providing these services, but there remains a gap in how these services are provided. And you point to a couple of areas around awareness creation, so that people are aware of what's available to them. You talked about evaluating these policies, these laws, to make sure that they are actually effective in what they're supposed to be doing. The aspect of challenging harmful norms, and the issue of access to these services. So with that, I'll hand back to Lillian. I see that Blessing has had to leave to attend a separate meeting, but we will be picking up the questions in the chat. So just keep them coming through. I'm noting them down. Thanks. Over to you, Lillian.
Thank you, Stella. This takes us to the last question within this session, and it goes to Christiana. Given the fact that the boys and adolescents are not a homogeneous group, how do factors such as race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and disability, among others, intersect with the experience of male survivors of sexual violence, and how can services be made more inclusive? Over to you, Christina. Christina, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes. Yes, Christine.
Just please give me a minute. I had an issue with my connection. I didn't hear the question, please, although I was following our panelists.
Okay, sure. So I'll repeat the question. How do factors such as race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and disability, among others, intersect with the experience of male survivors of sexual violence, and how can services be made more inclusive?
Just coming in to clarify that this question is for Christiana, who was one of the panelists, just to make sure that we're talking to Christiana, the GBV manager at Innovative Childcare and Women Empowerment Initiative.
Okay, yes, thank you, because I think it's not me. I'm Christine from Makerere University, so I think this is not for me. Thank you.
Okay,
it's for
no
Christiana.
No worries. Yeah. So I guess in the if Christiana is not present, maybe we can take some of the questions. There were some questions in the chat, quite a few questions for Blessing around has there been inclusion of street children, that's boys, in any of the studies on experiences with GBV. Nkiru asked if the study included boys living with disabilities, and were there any notable differences in the barriers for them. Rinat also was interested in which age groups are mostly affected by sexual violence and the services in uptake. And thanks to Camilla for the response that you provided. Caring for Boys 2018 study. It's linked to in the chat. You can look at more details in there, but yes, data included children with disabilities and street children. There might be additional data that came out from more recent studies. So do take a look at the literature on that. And then there was a question to Francis. Francis, I hope you're still with us. From,
yes, I am here.
Great, from Dunazwe. The question is, cultural practices are so dear to people and mostly cherished. How do you communicate negative traditional practices that are in violation of human rights, policies, laws to community members and still maintain acceptance during implementation? Over to you to take that question. Lillian, just check if there are any additional questions.
Yes, you know, cultural practices is essential because that is the culture of the people, and it is part of the people's lives, you know. But we also look at it that cultural practices is also form parts of our enable laws, because laws that are enacted has to be made in conformity with the culture, you know, or laws that are not in conformity with the culture cannot stand. Take, for instance, in Nigeria, there is a law that prohibits burying dead ones in the homes. But because it is our culture that we cannot throw away our loved ones, you know, this does not make the law to appear effective. You know, this is why I said law is dynamic, and also culture too is dynamic. Culture too is not static as well. So in this instance, we have to continue to rework our laws in conformity with the trends of the societal trends, you know. And for instance, in a situation where there is an occurrence of violence meted against a person, and the culture does not permit you to come out to the public to, you know, to speak out. You can as well speak out using the online platforms. Now I am speaking to this conference, you know, in a faraway Nigeria, and the whole world is listening to me. So if there is an online-based platform or backed by law, you know, for prompt reporting, I believe this will take care of cultural influences or cultural line of a demarcation, you know. It will be helpful. So we have to rework our laws. We have to reevaluate the existing ones, you know, rework it, let it be in conformity with the trends of things, you know, and from there we'll be able to arrest this menace and give the societal freedom or peace that it deserves. I don't know whether this answered that question. Stella, can you hear me? Can you hear me, please? Am I audible?
Yes, you are. I'm sorry. I was looking for the unmute button. Francis, thank you for that response. I'm going to ask Dunazwe to come in and indicate whether you feel that that was a good response or if you have follow-up.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. The situation here is a little bit dicey. So one of the things that I actually wanted to really know how to do is there's a lot of issues when it comes to early marriage, right? And then first marriage. And then you find out that this is so sensitive that it has to do with people's culture, and then sometimes with their religion as well. So then you find out that you get these people, not just girls are affected, even boys are affected in this, because I have come across someone that was married out by his parents as young as he was, and then he wasn't comfortable about the situation. However, it was difficult to address the situation because there is an religion perspective that backs that, and also the culture that backs that for that. So I am trying to have an idea, how do you get to address this, because it's so sensitive. It has to do with the religion, and then it also has to do with the culture. So in areas like this, how do you get to address this? Thank you, and over.
Okay. Can I speak to this?
Please go ahead, Francis, but let's keep it really, really short because we have to end. And I see
Yes.
another comment from Doreen. So you can maybe also speak to the point about, you know, when you're dealing with the justice system, police, for instance, might not have the capacity and the skills to handle some of these cases, and particularly when it's male survivor reporting because of these cultural beliefs that we heard about. So can you comment on those two, and then we can end the session?
Yes, in Nigeria we have these experiences, particularly in the northern part of Nigeria. But the law is supreme. There is religion, which is part of the people, and the people has a right to their religion belief. But there is also law. Law is supreme, and in this instance, there are a lot of hands that have to come on board, you know. A lot of stakeholders, the medicals have to come, the scholars have to come, and a lot of people have to come on board, create awareness, you know. For instance, in the case, you know, in a situation of an early marriage or forced marriage, you know, A child that is married out at maybe at the age of 8 or 10, who does not even know what a marriage is, who does not even know what it takes to conceive or to make babies, you know, there are a lot of medical challenges that are associated to these practices. So if medical practitioners, scholars and experts come out to speak, as we are doing here, come out to speak, create awareness, and our law is also given the strength, you know, given the strength enough to combat, is a menace to combat this menace or these practices that are repugnant to natural justice. You know, it is one of the things that a law considers, you know, when you are enacting laws. I said it earlier on that you have to consider the cultural practices of the people, but the cultural practices of the people that will form part of the laws must not be repugnant to natural justice. You know, it's a repugnancy to natural justice when you marry out a child, you know, outside is a consent. You know, it's not just, and it's not right. And as such, if such incident is reported, if it cannot be reported directly, if the victim cannot come out or publicly, and there is an online reporting system, if such is reported to a particular platform, I believe legal aid services will come out to assist such persons and get that persons out of that bondage. You know, that is my take to this.
Thank you for that, Francis. I guess what you're saying is that let us follow the law, even when it's in conflict, I guess, with cultural norms and practices. But thank you, everyone, for engaging. Thank you for your questions. I'm going to encourage Francis and Christiana to please go into the chat and respond to any pending questions that are in there for you. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. Sorry we ran over time. Back to you, George. Thank you for this time.
Thank you very much, Stella and the team. Now, we understand that we ran over the time, but I think this is very important because we are discussing very pertinent issues. There's still a lot more to be covered, and at this juncture, I would like to request that we take a 10 minutes break and then come back at exactly 11:30 East African time. Please do not log out, but let's just take a break of 10 minutes and come back at 11:30 East African time. Thank you very much.